Well, hey, everybody. Hey, Facebook Live. Hey, Talk Universe. We are here with Lindsay Spencer-Matthews. How are you, Lindsay?
Yeah, I'm fantastic. Thank you. It's a beautiful but overcast day in sunny Queensland, and it's
Beautiful.
a delight to be on your show, Nathan.
Yeah. Well, hey, we're going to have fun with this. Lindsay has a little bit of a sense of humor, so we're going to use that to our advantage. And yeah, I've already tried out the bio, already tested the website and all of that, and we're pretty much ready to rock. So if you have a question or a comment for Lindsay Spencer-Matthews, go ahead and type it. This is one rare opportunity for the guests that I have. It's a rare opportunity to actually get Q&A, get your questions answered without paying the billable rates of the people that I bring on the show.
Even if I was
So,
billing, the exchange rates in your favour, Nathan. So
yeah, well, I know that, but hey, so if you have a question or a comment, you're going to love Lindsay's talk because it's all about changing what we can change and leaving alone what we need to leave alone. It's like that serenity prayer. So this is going to be really fun. We're going to get started here in 3, 2, and we are live with Lindsay Spencer-Matthews. Lindsay, are you ready to talk?
I was born ready to talk. People say I can talk underwater, Nathan.
Lindsay Spencer-Matthews is an old dude with 25 years experience as a psychologist and 50 years work experience. Lindsay has done lots of dumb things and some brilliant things as well. And he's going to keep on trying to change the world one person at a time. Lindsay Spencer-Matthews, welcome to the talk.
Thank you, Nathan. You've already fallen into the trap of not taking a deep enough breath before you say my last name, but you managed to get it out there.
You caught that. Your talk is called How to Be the Luckiest Person in the World. You come out on stage, and it was just wonderful because you became the luckiest person in the world because you only change and fix the things that you can do something about. And you've learned what the Serenity Prayer talks about is not trying to fix the things that you can't fix at all. Please take us behind the talk.
Okay, well, yeah, the talk was definitely an attempt to leverage the work that I do in my private practice. And I genuinely walk the talk, Nathan. This is the philosophy that absolutely underlies my life, and I genuinely believe that I'm the luckiest person in the world. I also rationally know that I'm not. I realise that Richard Branson's got more money, and Brad Pitt's better looking, and you're more popular. But I can't be Richard Branson or Brad Pitt or Nathan Eckel. I can only be Lindsay Spencer-Matthews. And I think I've got an absolute intellectual, moral, and practical obligation to be the best I can be and accept the limitations that I can't do anything about. But your mention of the Serenity Prayer is an interesting one. Clients often have that, particularly alcoholic clients, have that light bulb moment where they say, "Oh, this is the Serenity Prayer." And I say, yeah, it's the Serenity Prayer on steroids, because the Serenity Prayer asks people to accept those things that they cannot change and to change those things they can change. But the factor that I believe my talk contributes to that is the third element, which is to exploit those things that are extraordinary in your life. And everybody has those things. And our brain's not actually programmed to seek out the things that are amazing, awesome, wonderful, fulfilling, and brilliant in our lives. Our brain is actually programmed to look at the other stuff, the stuff that needs to be fixed, or the stuff that can't be fixed. And so, yeah, the Serenity Prayer is brilliant for what it is. But the only way I believe to have a rich, full, and meaningful life is to do the two things that the Serenity Prayer invites you to do, but to also absolutely acknowledge and exploit the things that are spectacular and wonderful in your life.
Well, and I'd love to hone in on that a little bit. I mean, can you speak to this idea of rewiring our natural brain function to diagnose, troubleshoot, and go try to make everything okay, and instead embrace curiously embrace the ambiguity of what could be, and go on a adventure in the middle of your imperfect life?
Okay. Curiously embrace the ambiguity of what could be. That's probably one of the most complex constructs I've stumbled across, Nathan. Well done. I'm just
Well,
trying
hey,
to
I'm
untangle
good
it
at
on
that.
a
I'm good at that. Yeah.
Okay. I guess the fundamental of what I do as a psychologist and what I try and do in my TED talk is an attempt to get people to live lives of intention rather than by accident. I've actually privately got a label for people who've never thought about this kind of a concept, and I refer to those people as accidental adults. And these are people who have been exposed to a lifelong worth of genetics and environmental factors and those sort of things. And these people, uh, they don't realize that they're not actually in control of their lives, that the things that they've accidentally learned to do and be and think during their lives are the things that are actually controlling them. And so breaking free of that illusion of control is a really important thing to try and achieve. And that's where intentionality comes in. Is that too complex, Nathan?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think that's a great way to put it. I mean, we have an illusion of control. We have the illusion that, if it's to be, it's up to, and I guess there are really good things about that because you do need to take action. But then I think knowing how to balance that tightrope of when you're trying to force things and versus sitting on your backside and not doing anything versus trying to be a superhero of your own life and making things happen that may not be happening.
Yep. You're exactly right. And the reality of every ordinary person's life is that the overwhelming majority of the things that they do on automatic pilot, the things they do that they don't know they do, almost all of those things work. I mean, I don't want to be in control of my muscles while I'm walking up and down a flight of stairs. I want to be able to do that without conscious thought. But if I'm engaged in a complex or problematic emotional conversation with the woman that I love, I don't want to be abandoning myself to the over 60 years of programming that would otherwise be in control of me. I want to be able to try and engage my rational, intelligent, thoughtful brain so that I respond rather than with default angry, negative things. I want to respond with hopefully intelligent, articulate, positively emotional things.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, what can you speak to that when we're in relationships and that's probably one of the best domains to be talking about this because other than being a star athlete or completing a marathon or doing some heroic thing where yeah where a lot of people who are able to persevere in an activity like that, they're able to persevere in their career. They've found a working model of success to set an intention and follow through. And if they don't end up in the hospital, they're going to complete that thing. But then in the world of relationships, it's totally different because we can't control that other person.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And that's where almost every other aspect of life is relatively simple. The world of sport, the world of work, even the world of acquaintanceships, they're relatively small domains in which to operate. But in the world of relationships, we've got an intense, long-term, engaged process where we begin by knowing a little bit about the person that we fall in love with. And then the more years and decades we spend with them, the more we learn about them under different circumstances. And there is a potential for us to learn and discover things about them that we may find confusing or problematic or even alienating. I mean, we can also find out things that are awesome about them as well on that journey. But if we surrender ourselves unwittingly to our lifetime's programming, then we're almost inevitably going to get to a point in that complex interweaving of two lives where our subconscious brain is going to find something about the other party which is an arguable deal breaker. And our subconscious only knows how to deal with deal breakers in a couple of ways, and they're not conducive to functional relationships. That's to either leave, to maintain the status quo and remain unhappy, and that's basically where our subconscious brain stops. And so, we either have the almost inevitable disaster of divorce, or the almost equally distasteful prospect of an unhappy, bitter, acrimonious relationship. And, I wouldn't wish either of those things on my worst enemy.
Yeah, it almost sounds like a sucker's choice. I've heard the phrase you can have this, which is
Absolutely.
pretty lousy, or you can have this, which in some ways is even worse. Is there
However,
a third
there is,
way? Is there, is it's
there is in
probably not
fact,
an easier way, but what's the third way for those of us that won't accept either of those?
excellent. And I wouldn't encourage anyone to accept either of those without a fight. But there are, in fact, two alternatives. And only our intelligent brain, only humans have access to these two alternatives, by the way. The first alternative is to change our environment, which comes back to the serenity prayer, where we change the things we can change. That if my child is unhappy with their bedroom, then I can explore environmental changes with them and say, well, would you like us to repaint it? Would you like us to, I don't know, put a bigger window in? And if we can, the easiest third alternative is to resolve problematic aspects of the environment. But from my world as a psychologist, the fourth option and the most viable and accessible, but arguably most difficult, is we can change those things that need to be changed within ourselves. And that's problematic because our subconscious hates change. It does not want us to change. It wants to retain the status quo. And change is unbelievably difficult. There's a brilliant video on YouTube called The Reverse Steering Bicycle, where this guy stumbles across a bike where if you turn the handlebars to the right, the front wheel turns to the left. And if you turn the handlebars to the left, it turns to the right. And like all of us, he sees the problem and he intuitively believes that he's going to be able to ride the bike. And so he confidently sits astride the bike and attempts to ride it and falls off instantly. And he's sort of bemused and a little angry about it. And he borrows the bike and he goes about the difficult task of retraining his brain to be able to ride this counterintuitive bicycle. And I've got no affiliation with this guy, by the way, but it's a really fascinating 8 minutes of looking at the mechanics of change. And it shows that you need awareness of what needs to be changed. You need dedication as to what you've got to do to change, and then you've got to put time and effort into it. Everyone comes to any sort of counselling with some sort of hope that they're going to get a quick fix, that the counsellor is going to say, what you need is you need to change A for B. And I mean, if it's that easy, I'd be charging $5,000 a session and I'd have a queue of people around the block. But it's way harder than that. Well, that it's got to be the individual who's aware and empowered and then puts the effort in. And that's the challenge, Nathan.
Well, we've been enjoying this talk with Lindsay Spencer-Matthews. His talk is called How to Be the Luckiest Person in the World. And we're going to find out more about how to be the luckiest person in the world in the Blitz round, which is coming up next. And we're back with Lindsay Spencer-Matthews. And it is time for the Blitz round. I'm going to ask Lindsay a series of either or questions related to the preparation and performance of his recent talk. Lindsay, are you ready?
I'll give it my best, Nathan.
First off, were you invited to speak or did you apply?
I applied.
And what's your advice for people who have to apply like the rest of us?
Okay, well, I had a tiny bit of an edge. My wife and I actually ran a TEDx conference a couple of years back. And so I guess we had a little bit of TED street cred. And I think the conveners of the TEDx talk at the University of Queensland that I had the honour and privilege of talking at were immediately attracted by the topic, and we went and had a chat with them, and luckily they liked me and what I said, and the rest is history.
All right, so this is new information. We've got a former art organizer here, which I love. Absolutely love. That means we're going to do a bonus session with Lindsay's organizer hat on, because once an organizer, always an organizer. But we got the speaker hat on right now. Are you a memorizer? Are you an improviser? Or are you a blender?
Well, I'm a blender with a very strong preference for improvisation. I've been on stage. I've been an enthusiastic amateur theatre contributor. I've had a bunch of lead roles in all sorts of things. So I am capable of memorizing. And I think I put more time and effort into memorizing my TED talk than any role I've ever had to play before. But the thing that I found really difficult about it was that I had the 18-minute limit. And I rehearsed and practiced and memorized for 6 months. And I had it down to 16 minutes. And when I came off stage, my wonderful wife said, "Wow, how did you manage to time it so well?" And up until that moment, I'd forgotten that there was a countdown clock that I could see from the stage, and I didn't realise that I went 17 minutes and 50 seconds. So an improviser is my preference.
Love it. And what's a tip, tool, or technique that helped you?
Practice, 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 practice.
And how do you practice? Because that can be one of these things of controlling what we can control, and then there's a mindfulness to the practice too. Because if we practice, if we practice and we have a practicing with a blind spot, we're practicing with a blind spot, practicing with a blind spot. So can you kind of get a little meta and explain the process of practice to us a little bit?
Okay, well, I think the two things that were hardest for me was initially, as I was learning it, still reading from the script that I'd prepared. I did a lot of that in front of a mirror, so I could increase my awareness of physical mannerisms. So there was a little bit of relearning in that. But the other was every time I practiced, I recorded it. And that gave me two things. It gave me the duration of the talk, and it gave me the discipline of having to listen back to what I'd said and see whether I was using the right nuances and emphases during the talk.
All right, Talk Universe. I love both of those, and I'm a big fan of both of those. And I've done both of those, especially not just the recording, but I love trying to stare myself down in the mirror. I don't know if you've ever tried that, Lindsay. You kind of have a blinking competition with yourself in the mirror while trying to do this. It definitely can keep you on their toes a little bit.
However, there was one other tip that I will give people. There were a couple of times during my talk where I deliberately wanted to talk to the audience that was going to be looking at it for hopefully eternity. And so I chatted with the AV guys before the talk and discovered which of the 3 stationary cameras they were using was actually relatively close up on my face. And so each time I got to a point where I wanted to make some sort of meaningful eye contact with my televised audience, I made it a point to seek out that camera, and I'm kind of hoping that it still looked fluid in the overall talk, that it just looked like I was, looking around at my audience. But then I would look back to the online and hopefully future audience, so that there could be that meaningful connection made.
Powerful stuff. Powerful. And that's an advanced tip, is knowing which camera is which, and looking on the fly into the correct one for the correct effect.
You're right. It is an advantage. It's real, because when you're up there and you've got the live audience engaging with you, and the awareness that there's potentially thousands and thousands of people watching it into the future, it's very hard to keep all the juggling balls in the air at the same time.
Well, it certainly is. We've been enjoying the Blitz Round with Lindsay Spencer-Matthews. Before we go any further, I've got to tell you where you can go to check out this talk, How to Be the Luckiest Person in the World. You can go to our show notes page at bethetalk.com, as well as we're going to have a link to Lindsay's website, greatchangemaker.com.au, greatchangemaker.com.au. And we're going to be back in just a moment with Lindsay Spencer-Matthews' final word of advice. And we're back with the final word of advice for Talk Universe. What is it, Lindsay?
Be intentional in what you do. The first step of intention is awareness. The second is deliberate choice of action. And the third is practice it and put it into place.
Well, Lindsay Spencer-Matthews, thank you so much for coming on the talk today and sharing your wisdom with Talk Universe.
It has been such a pleasure. Thank you for being such a delightful host, Nathan.
Well, thank you for the kind words. So now, if you don't mind, if we can do a quick second bonus Blitz round with your organizer. I did not know you were an organizer. or
Well,
had been an organizer. Once an organizer,
yeah.
always an organizer. We got to dig into that
Well,
stuff. And I
okay.
will say this: we
Might
have another guest who's actually watching this right now, and I've actually sent you your link again. And I don't see you in the lobby, and there's no way I can bring you on before the hard stop that you have, unless I see you in the lobby. So we're going to do this second blitz round with Lindsay, is what we'll do.
So do you need me to do something, Nathan? Lindsay?
No, I don't. No, I don't. I'm speaking to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have. I know the other guest has a little bit of a hard stop, but I don't see where I can bring him on the stage here. So we're going to keep going with you and a second bonus round here. So anything that I need to stay away from, or steer clear of, or fair game.
You need to know that it's highly unlikely that my wonderful wife and I will ever organise another TEDx talk.
Well, I can understand and appreciate that. It's a lot of work.
It nearly broke us. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot of work. So we can keep it light. I just think that there's an awful lot. Frankly, there's an awful lot that TED and these other branded events, they leave it on the table when all they do with the official podcast is basically rebroadcast the top who's who and great podcasts to listen to, great speeches, great talks, but it's like this is what we want to be mining for. And I've only had a handful of organizers on. I think you're number 4 or number 5. Cool. I've had a couple of 2 or 3 big TED alumni on, and so when I hear a little hint about having been an organizer, my antenna goes real high. I'm gonna clue right in on that. So
and I think that there might be some benefit and some fun in it.
Yeah, there definitely will be. So we'll jump back into it in 3, 2. And we are live again with Lindsay Spencer-Matthews. Lindsay, are you ready to talk?
Always ready to talk to you, Nathan.
Okay, this is a bonus session because we were in the blitz round, and Lindsay has his speaker hat on, and he said something about having been an organizer. And if you've listened and subscribed to Be the Talk, you know that I love talking to organizers, whether they've organized in the past, whether they're currently organizing, when they're preparing to organize. Now, Lindsay has done this in the past, and as both of us can attest to, I've never been a primary organizer before, but I've seen enough behind the scenes to really appreciate, oh my gosh, all of the work that goes into this behind the scenes. You got to build a team. You got to find great speakers. You got to get sponsors to pay for the event. Then you got to sell tickets to the public and fill up the arena, and whatever size arena that might be. Lindsay, what am I leaving out here? There are all kinds of things I'm leaving out.
You're right, Nathan, but you've accurately identified the 3 big hotspots. The finding a team, finding speakers, and finding sponsors are the 3 big deals. However, the least of those, the one that provided us the least problem was finding speakers. We put out a call and we were inundated. So rather than finding speakers, the biggest challenge is selecting speakers. Determining by CV, by interview, by track record, and by topic, which people were likely to grasp the nettle on the day and really augment the event. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how enthusiastic or generous your sponsors are. It doesn't matter how brilliantly you've set up the room. It doesn't matter how fabulous your team has organised the day. What matters is what the speakers do in their 18 minutes in front of on the stage. So the other thing that I think is worthwhile is the phenomenal legacy of doing such an event. We had a relatively short day. We only had 9 speakers.
That's a full day. I mean, there are some that are bigger than that. I mean, 9 speakers is 9 speakers.
Yes. The event that I spoke at, there were 12 speakers, so it was a huge day. But the 9 speakers we got were all uniformly really good and interesting. And we had a couple that were absolutely out of the box, spectacularly wonderful. And one even though I'm a hardened old cynic, one even made me cry and
Oh,
laugh
wow.
at the same talk. So it was it really had all of the best elements that you could hope for in a TED talk. And yeah, I mean, I'd love to give her a plug. I've got nothing to gain from it, but is that okay, Nathan?
Oh, please. Please. Where can we go to ride this emotional roller coaster with you?
This lady, she's a professional comedian and a clown doctor, and her name's Jenny Winters.
A
Winters W.
clown doctor?
Oh, you don't have that phenomenon where you are.
No, we have
these
like clown horror slasher psycho killers that dress up as clowns. But is this a doctor that clowns around? Is this a clown that helps? Is like a jester to doctor? What is a clown doctor?
A clown doctor in Australia is, and there's many of them. It's a rigorous process they have to go through, and their objective is to lighten the burden of seriously ill children. And
Okay.
it's just inspirational what they do. They do it for no money, and they get all the regalia on, and they bring all of their comedic and funny tricks and things to a hospital room. And their objective is to make a very ill and potentially miserable child a little happier for a few moments. And there's all sorts of medical and psychological evidence to demonstrate the value in this. And yeah, I'm just awed and inspired by these people. So Jenny's talk had two elements. One was her talk is about abandoning the brace position. And she argues that every time you take an aeroplane flight, they tell you what to do in case of an accident, that you fold your arms against the seat ahead of you and you put your head down. And she said, what is the point if you're dropping out of the sky from 30,000 feet? So that's number one. And the second is, not that many aeroplanes fall out of the sky. And so why would you prepare yourself for disaster when most of the flight is going to be a joyful experience? And she exquisitely told the journey of her grandmother's demise, which her mother, I don't want to give too much away, but her mother died very young, and so she had a subconscious expectation that the people that she loved would die. And so she and her sister spent 30 years with no evidence waiting for their grandmother to die because their grandmother took them over. And she told this exquisitely beautiful story of how it wasn't until their grandmother fell terribly ill and was dying that they realized that they could release themselves of the burden of expectation of disaster and just embrace the journey. And she exquisitely and poignantly expressed her regret that they hadn't done that for 30 years, that they only did it for the whatever it was, 30 days or so that it took their beloved grandmother to pass away. And then she top ended it with some equally poignant, beautiful stories from her experiences as a clown doctor.
So you're organizing an event, Lindsay, and then you have a very heightened emotional talk like that. Where do you put someone? Do you put her in the beginning? Do you put her at the end? Do you put her in the middle? How did you curate that?
We put it at the end. We wanted to end the day with a bang. The moment we met this lady, we knew she was likely to be gold. We knew we had a strong lineup of speakers, so our belief was that we weren't going to need a kickstart in the middle. You know how people sometimes flag in the middle or the afternoon. So we started with a very strong speaker. We then had a list of equally strong people, and then we finished with Jenny, and we were just so glad we did.
And now it always fascinates me. Did you take on the role of the MC? Did you have an MC in there? Who did you bring in to kind of manage the energy level of the room and introduce the next speaker, or did you do something entirely different?
No, I was the MC, Nathan. So I appear on none of the TED Talks.
In
In
between them.
In between them. So,
in between.
I love the role, being able to. After every speaker, we had a very quick Q&A, and they were Dorothy Dix Q&As. It was me asking spontaneous questions of the speaker. So there was a tiny bit of pressure on me to be able to do the sort of job that you do, but do it in front of the live audience to kind of augment the experience for the audience. So yeah, that was how we went with me as the MC.
So how did you get involved and work your way into a position of organizer? You got a busy practice. You've got plenty of other things to
Yeah.
be doing, and then you came back and gave your own talk afterwards. So can you just briefly give me a little bit of a timeline? Take me back to when you first heard about TED and how you applied for license, or maybe perhaps some people take it over from other established licensees. There are all kinds of different ways that people get involved. So I'd love to hear your
Yep.
story.
Well, Sarah, my wife, and I, we've been avid consumers of TED Talks for 20 years.
Mm.
And so, I've listened to and watched at least hundreds of TED Talks. And we live in a kind of a bit of a troubled regional city. We live in the city of Ipswich in Queensland, and it has an interesting blue collar history where the two main industries in Ipswich had actually died out. Coal mining and train building were the mainstays of Ipswich's growth historically. And so we live in this wonderful emerging regional city. It is growing, but it still has some challenges. And we decided that we wanted to give the gift of TEDx wisdom to Ipswich. And so we approached the local council, and they were pretty enthusiastic. And so it was relatively easy to segue in. Sarah applied for the license, and the TED organisation gave it to us. They also gave us the e-manual, which, if it was printed out, would be about that thick.
Yeah,
of all of the rules and limitations.
gotta be done within those parameters.
Yes, and I respect their right. They've got an incredible international brand, and I think they've got every right to protect it. But it makes it relatively limiting and restricting as an organizer. But that's okay. We were happy to follow all of those limitations. And then the next challenge was to try and get the money. I mean, even our little regional TED Talk still was close to 40 grand to produce for the day.
Wow.
And we didn't cut any corners. We had really good catering. We had professional AV. It was a big deal. We had a beautiful, intimate little venue, and it's an innovation hub in Ipswich. And we had. I often say, I'm reflecting on it, that we had hopes that were that high, and we had expectations that were that high, and we had an outcome that was that high. It was
nice.
At the end of the day, we were exhausted, but we were just blown away. We did. I believe that we and our speakers and our team produced an outcome that was world class. It was just wonderful how it all came together at the end.
And so I'm curious, I mean, what a happy ending to the story. What was the impact, and what was the response of the community and maybe the powers that be in the community as you were preparing for it? Did they really rally around it, even though it was the first one? What was the impact coming out of it? Did it really highlight in the way that you wanted your city and benefit the city overall?
Great question, Nathan, and I haven't actually formulated any sort of a response to that. So I think one of the things that should we ever do such a thing again, and it's unlikely that we will, but should we ever do such a thing again, one of the things that we would need to put in place proactively would be managing the post-event promotion of the speakers, and getting the sponsors to be more proactive in promoting the speakers, getting the sponsors to take more ownership and pride of their involvement with it. It was an inaugural event that had never happened in our city before. Our local city council has chased us very hard for over a year to try and get us to do it again, but we were absolutely we were shattered by.
Well, it's a balancing act, or an unbalancing act. And Talk Universe, you may or may not know this by now. Organizers are volunteers, and so they're leading other volunteers, and nobody gets paid for doing this. So these amazing events that you see and these amazing stages and the amazing AV and the amazing caterers, the vendors get paid because they need to be paid because it needs to be recorded well, it needs to be edited well. But the organizers do not receive any compensation other than, just goodwill and giving back to the community. And, that's part of the reason I'm asking the questions. I know some of the questions to ask, and it can be, if you have that desire and the bandwidth and perhaps are a little bit independently wealthy, it can be a nice little side hobby for many people. But it is a challenge to do that and then balance your everyday life and be leading, not managing volunteers. You have to lead volunteers who also have busy lives and give very generously and liberally of their time and energy.
Can I make a comment regarding volunteers,
Please,
Nathan?
please.
Sure. The single biggest challenge we had was getting a team of volunteers. We had no shortage of people wanting to be involved. And one of the things the TED manual recommends is that you give every volunteer a small task to do that's not vital or important, and you then ignore them. And you give them a time period. You say, okay, Mary Smith, you want to be a volunteer, great. What we need to happen is we need someone to get prices on printing the booklets, and we've got to have this done within a week. Now, you're happy to do that, Mary? At the volunteer meeting, Mary says, yeah, I know a printer. My brother-in-law's a printer. Yes, I'll do that. And you then say, thanks, Mary. Here's all the details. We'll talk to you in a week. And then in a week, you go to the printers and get, I mean, what you want is for Mary to come back in 5 days and say, here's all the work I've done. I've got 4 prices. I'll get and that's kind of fairyland. It doesn't happen that way.
Well, so and that's when you have a keeper, when they actually take the initiative on the front end and then they come right back around on the back end. You ask me how I know. I've led boards of directors of volunteer organizations, and that is really good advice. That is so much better than, hey, somebody comes up, I want to be on the board, give me a board, and that is not a good thing at all. That's a great way to funnel people and let them, merit based gain more and more authority and responsibility.
Yeah, because your only alternative is to be a micromanager, and then you may as well do the work yourself. And that's heartbreaking and exhausting. The other interesting phenomenon about organisers is that on the day, as we were putting the venue together, it's a relatively public venue. As we were putting it together, we had people associated with the venue sort of happenstance stumbling across it and saying, what's this? Oh, TED Talks. Oh, can we help? So on the day, we had more ushers than we could deal with.
Oh, nice.
But you cannot organise an event of that magnitude on the serendipitous outcome of finding ushers on the day. So,
and the name I briefly caught, it was TEDx Wisdom. Is that what? No, that was
TEDx Ipswich.
Ipswich. Okay.
Yes.
You were talking about the wisdom of TEDx in Ipswich, your city.
Correct.
Right there. Yep. So we've been enjoying Lindsay Spencer-Matthews. This is a special organizer bonus session, and Lindsay is not currently an active organizer, and he swears that he's never going to be again. However, it was a great experience. If you've ever led teams of volunteers, if you've ever done something like, you might understand a little bit of how you can be completely open-hearted, completely grateful for a wonderful experience, and not go back into the ring again. And that's what it sounds like we have here, which is great. We're all learning. I really appreciate, Lindsay, you're being willing to be candid about all this. What's your final word of advice for people who, and a lot of people don't know they can apply to be organizers. So it's very, very possible. What's your final word of advice to that end?
If you are a TED devotee, if you love the concept, and if you want to gift a gift to your community, then give it a go. But give yourself plenty of time, plenty of discipline, and treat it like a business. Even though you're not allowed to make any money out of it, treat it as though the family farm depended upon it, and then hopefully you'll get great outcomes.
Lindsay Spencer-Matthews, thank you again for this wonderful bonus session, sharing your wisdom with Talk Universe today.
Good on you, Nathan. Thank you.
All right. Hey, thank you so much for doing that. A little extra bonus time. Dom, we missed you, man. I reach out to you again on email. I hope everything's okay on his end, but we use the extra time for good. And yeah, I'm going to end the broadcast. If any of you have any questions for Lindsay related to the original session or even the bonus session, I know he'll be checking out this thread. If I think we're connected on Facebook, I'll be able to tag Lindsay if so he'll be able to see that even if this is not live. And you can share it, you can spread it, you can make it work.
Yeah, I'm not a very avid user of Facebook, but I'll try and do my best to keep an eye out for it, Nathan.
Well, and on LinkedIn too. All right. Hey, thanks so much, Talk Universe Facebook Live, for joining us today. We're going to go offline. Take care.